Hello everyone, this is Mark Harris and I'm going to show you my final project for N516, Advanced Interactive Design Application in the Arts. And my final project is an interactive tutorial for learning the channel strip of the Audient ASP4816 analog audio console, which you see here in the center image. Audient is a British company in the UK, and so a lot of the things you'll see spelling-wise are actually British spellings. For the color scheme, I chose colors that are actually from the console itself, and I chose the two panel design so that I had functionality to switch between the views. The channel strip overview is basically just going through what a channel strip actually is, and most channel strips run from top to bottom, so the Audient is the same way. We'll start with the input pod and go all the way down to the long fader, which is really where my one of my core functionalities is. But this is just an overview page that tells the students what this would be on the console itself. The reason I chose this for a project is because the documentation on the Audient website is actually the documentation for the 8024 console. So, for example, instead of having 16 channels of selection up here, which I'll show you when we get to routing, there's 24 in the manual, and the manual is black and white, so there's no way to tell color on the knobs. We start with the input pod, which is where you select and regulate your input, whether it's a line input or a microphone input. And so each one of these is a hotspot that's over an actual photo that I took of an actual 4816 console. So I created the hotspots and created hovers so that inline text would show up. And so basically you can scroll over any of the buttons or knobs and it will tell you exactly what the function of that control is. This is where there was a lot of difference between the 8024 and the 4816. For example, there was another row of buttons here to give you 20 channels. And so that was one thing. The other thing was there were two more auxiliaries, 7 and 8, which were switchable from these cues. So I had to change the documentation in that. All of the auxiliaries here have the same function, so I grouped them together in one function. And then the Q, A, and B are a little bit different, so I had those separate and listed their functionality separately. Equalizers, you'll notice, is spelled with an S instead of a Z. And once again, all of these are hotspots that tell you exactly what each one of the knobs or buttons does. The short fader is the mic line fader, and it can be actually changed. The faders can be flipped, and we'll see that in the next section. But again, each one of these controls is just a hotspot where you can scroll and see the explanation or the definition of that actual control. Flip and pan is where you can switch between the short fader and the long fader, and so that is telling you on the indicators which one is set up, and that's also where you have your pan and your mix assignment for the short fader, and then solo and cut. And then the long fader is really where my core functionality is. I wanted to show the markings because that's really the only thing that was showing on the manual for this section, but I wanted to do it differently. So I created this vertical fader, and that gives us the pop-ups at the key markings based on the slider value. Moving forward, one of the things that I want to change in this core functionality is to change this to a horizontal slider, style this thumb, and then rotate it 90 degrees so that it actually looks more like the fader. Currently, the vertical slider command overrides that thumb command, so there's no way to really stylize it to look like the actual fader. So that's one of the things. Another thing that I'd like to do, for example, on the input pod is these insert buttons are where you would usually assign your microphone to a compressor and then bring it back into the signal. So what I would like to do with some of these is insert video showing that actual process, at least as an option, so that instead of just having the pop-up text, you would have actually a video that would show you what would be there and how to do that in an actual studio. So this is my project, and I hope that you've enjoyed looking at it with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.